Hey everyone, and welcome to the Mark Prater podcast, where our aim is to connect our global family of Sovereign Grace churches with our executive director. Mark, speaking of global, as you record this, you are heading out next week for Sydney, Australia to be a part of and help lead the Global Leaders Retreat. And you're teaching a session there on important lessons for extra local leaders. There's a number of lessons that you'll be talking about. One in particular, though, you want to talk about with us on this episode.
Yeah, I've actually got six lessons in that outline, what I'll teach next week with the global leaders. And as I was praying about our episode today and what to just discuss, I had a number of ideas, just felt like the Lord wanted me to zero in on one of those points. It's actually the second one that I list as important lessons for leaders. The first one is the leader's consistent pursuit of Christ.
Hmm.
And this is the second one, the leader's consistent pursuit of humility,
Hmm.
I think is really, really an important one. So my first, actually, I've got six overall points. The first three are really about the leader himself. And the second one is the leader's consistent pursuit of humility. Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 4:1, this is how one should regard us. So how should one regard Paul? How should one regard leaders in the church? And this is what he says:
Hmm.
as servants of Christ and stewards of the mysteries of God. So how should one regard a leader in the church? As a servant of Christ and a steward of the mysteries of God. What that
Hmm.
really means is he's responsible to steward the gospel, to preach the gospel, to build a gospel culture, to make gospel connections in people's lives, all those things that we know well in Sovereign Grace. That's who a leader is, a servant of Christ, and what he's called to do is to be a steward of the gospel. And I believe that one of the ways that we steward the gospel culture that we build in our churches is primarily our preaching, obviously, but then the leader's example. The leader's example is
Hmm.
really, really important in building and maintaining and strengthening a gospel culture, because a leader's life, a leader's character shapes the people that he's responsible to lead and care for. That's just the reality. You see it over and over again. So um, we must realize that as pastors and leaders, that people, they watch our life. They watch our
Yeah.
life, they watch how we lead, and it shapes them, and it shapes the gospel culture that we desire to build. And I just think it's something that we need to be aware of as pastors. And I want to remind you of again today, obviously, for a number of different reasons. Here's one of them. I find that the members of Sovereign Grace churches are wonderfully encouraging people.
Yes.
They consistently encourage, and to the members of our churches that are listening to this episode or reading it, please continue to be encouraging. It's
Yes. Yes.
such a joy to lead. But they can be encouraging about our preaching, they can be encouraging about our
Right.
leadership, and that's the gospel fruit in their lives. It's one of our shaping virtues. So it's a good
Yeah.
thing. But leaders must be careful not to just believe the headlines,
Mm.
as we talk about, and begin to very subtly allow pride to creep into the heart. And we have a phrase. Let me just illustrate it this way. We have a phrase around the Prater house that's this: "Don't let it go to your head." And I
Yeah.
won't go into a long story, but this was over a decade ago. I was talking with Jill about something that I was being encouraged in, and she just said, "Don't let it go to your head." And I said, "What?" She said, "Don't let it go to your head." So she was more concerned about my godliness, and that phrase has stuck in our home, and it's used often in our home because I
Mm.
need to hear it. So
That's good.
it's a phrase that sort of jolted me in the moment, but is exactly what I needed to hear. Don't let it go to your head. Receive the encouragement, be grateful for it, but
Right.
don't let it go to your head and obviously to your heart, and allow it to foster pride. We have to be aware of um, just the pride that subtly lingers in all of our hearts, but certainly in a leader's heart. And I mention that because not only do we get a lot of encouragement, we can also get input, we can get criticism, we can get
Mm,
critique. And I find that the humble leader is able to walk through that criticism with a godliness that can shape the gospel culture in his church.
that's right.
Let me just illustrate it again using my wonderful wife, Jill. This was in the troubled years of sovereign grace, as I called them, and we were getting criticized a lot very publicly because I was in the role that I'm in. I was getting criticized publicly. There were things being said about me online that people were making me aware of. I'm like, that's not even true. And I
Mm,
remember going into Jill, just, sort of exasperated. That's not even true. You know what those
mm.
things are saying about me. And she kind of looked at me and she said, why are you worried about this? Um, you're actually much worse than what those people think. Again, it was one of those
Mm,
jolting statements. And I kind of paused. I'm like, yeah, you're right.
mm,
I'm far worse than what I'm being criticized
mm.
for. And it readjusts your perspective. It helps you to cultivate humility. And I want to read this quote from A Godly Man's Picture, or The Godly Man's Picture, written by Thomas Watson. He's one of my favorite Puritan authors, by the way. And this is what he says: a humble Christian studies his own infirmities and another's excellencies, and that makes him put a higher value upon others than himself.
Mm.
Study your own infirmities, study others' excellencies, and that can be a wonderful way to pursue humility in your life, especially that of a pastor and a leader who is responsible to shape a gospel culture.
Wow. Well, Mark, because of the weighty task that we have been given as pastors and leaders to care for the people of God, to serve Christ by caring for his people, because we are being studied as leaders, which is definitely true. If you're not aware of that, it's time to become aware. And because when we are in our right minds, then we are confident, we are unimpressive in and of ourselves. This is an evergreen and relevant topic. So let's keep going. How do we pursue humility?
Yeah, I'm going to answer that question by just giving you questions.
Hmm.
Questions I ask myself, questions that I hope serve you. So, just in pursuing humility, I will sort of do a self check every once in a while. Am I confessing sin consistently?
Hmm.
Because it's there and I'm convicted. Am I confessing sin consistently? Do I admit when I'm wrong? And I am many times. Do I listen earnestly to those around me? That list would include, first of all, my wife, my fellow elders, my fellow pastors that I serve with on the leadership team. Do I listen to leaders in covenant fellowship and other leaders in sovereign grace churches? Here's another question: do I disagree graciously?
Hmm.
Because we're going to disagree as leaders, especially as we work
Right.
together on pluralities and on teams, and that's a good thing. That's actually healthy. If that disagreement is both strong and clear, but also gracious and humble. So those are some questions I ask myself every so often because I just find out I just need to do that self check, or I might ask Jill those questions. Just keep in mind, I think humble leadership has an oversized effect on building and strengthening a gospel culture because a leader's character runs downhill and it affects those he leads. So just an
Hmm.
encouragement regarding some ways to apply it, especially through the questions I mentioned.
Those are some excellent questions and sobering questions when we assess ourselves honestly. I know for my part, recently I've been working to ensure that when apologizing, which is necessary as a regular way of life with others, that I'm doing so without any qualification,
Mm,
or smuggling in any sense of, but,
mm,
and no, you did, but
mm,
just without any equivocation, just simply confessing and asking for forgiveness. So great questions. I'm certainly going to be taking those out of this episode. You're serving
mm.
me, Mark,
Okay.
as we record this. But before we conclude, uh, you want to read another quote from this Puritan you love, Thomas Watson.
Yeah, it's a section on humility that Thomas Watson has in his book, The Godly Man's Picture, that I've read several times because I need to, and I just thought this is so good. I want to include it. So here's this section, and this is what Watson says: a humble man is willing to have his name and gifts eclipsed, so that God's glory may be increased.
Mm,
He is content to be outshone by others in gifts and esteem so that the crown of Christ may shine even brighter.
mm,
This is the humble man's motto: let me decrease, let Christ increase. It is his desire that Christ should be exalted. And
yes.
if this has affected whoever is the instrument, he rejoices.
Mm,
A humble Christian is content to be laid aside if
mm,
God has any other tools to work with which may bring him more glory.
mm. Beautiful.
Puritans write well, and that is humbling and one I've read many, many times, and I hope it serves you.
Beautiful. I'll spend the rest of my life, hopefully, writing different things for ministry. I will never write any sentence that sounds
Yeah,
anything like that.
exactly.
So thank you
Me
for
neither.
sharing those beautiful words. And all of us, I can't help but remember the familiar reminder from Dr. Carson. How can anyone be arrogant beside the
Mm,
cross?
mm,
And so
good word.
we're grateful for you, Mark, and for your encouragement in this regard. Let's all take it to heart and be praying for you as you head to Sydney, along with other guys from the leadership team, as you go to serve those guys there. So, thanks everybody for checking out the podcast. We'll see you here next week, Lord willing. Bye for now.
Thank you for watching. If you have questions or comments, Mark would love to hear from you. For more videos like this, hit subscribe on YouTube or by email at markkprater.com.